I'm Bill Jones, and welcome to VYPE TV, a show that highlights local athletes, their schools, and their communities. On today's show, we're now in the regional round of the playoffs. Tim Polzer is here to help preview some of today's best games. John Clark was not only a winning coach in Plano, but he's been a role model for decades in the community. Find out what inspires him. In this week's recruiting update, we'll talk about players not going to Big 12 schools. Why will they play so far from home? And finally, we'll tell you who the best 5 football players are in North Texas. It's time to name the finalists for the first ever Landry Award. Well, it's already week number 3 of the playoffs. 11 games were played last night. 17 more scheduled for today. Catch the latest scores at the bottom of the screen throughout the show. And there are a lot of good matchups today. Here to talk about them, Tim Polzer, editor-in-chief for VYPE magazine. Thanks for being here as usual, Tim. And of course, VYPE will be at Cowboys Stadium for sure for the triple header today. What a quadruple header we had last week, highlighted by Trinity's exciting win over Allen, 37-35.
That was a great game. Just to top off, 4 games, 11 a.m. to almost midnight by the time we got out of there. But Allen made Trinity look a little vulnerable, but Trinity, once again goes into its bag of tricks, pulls out the big plays, especially with Brandon Carter. So it was, a game for the ages.
And folks can follow what's going on today through VYPE, right?
Absolutely. Go to VYPE.com/DFW. We'll be blogging, tweeting, everything, social networking that you can possibly do so you can follow the action.
And follow the action as well next month in the latest issue of VYPE magazine. Let's get into the matchups today as Denton Guyer takes on Abilene Cooper. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff at Cowboys Stadium, and Guyer, of course, led by their quarterback, J.W. Walsh.
He's amazing. He had another spectacular game last week. Guyer's really offensively is loaded, and their defense has really been stepping it up of late. They'll have a challenge with Cooper, one of the best teams out of West Texas this year. So I really like the bracket that Guyer is in, though. I think they've got a good shot at going all the way to the state finals.
What has it been that's impressed you the most about J.W. Walsh and what you've seen? He came into the season billed as perhaps the best dual-threat quarterback in the state, and he's lived up to that billing, hasn't he?
He has. Obviously, the stats are impressive, but he plays a leadership role. He's very calm. He's played really well in the clutch and been a real field general, so to speak, to use a cliche. And that probably, comes with being a coach's kid, doesn't hurt.
Yep, he is the coach's son. He's headed to Oklahoma State University. And so after he plays today, I'm sure he'll be watching the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Oklahoma Sooners tonight. All right, next matchup we're going to highlight here. Coppell goes out west. They're playing at Midland against Midland. It's a 2 o'clock kickoff. And Coppell, you had to stay up very late to watch them last week against Duncanville, but a very impressive performance at Cowboys Stadium.
They did. Joe Minden had 4 TDs through the air, obviously, but Duncanville tried to shut down Cam McDaniel a bit, and Minden really stepped up. But Coppell's defense really played well again, too. After giving up an opening TD drive to Duncanville, they really shut them down, and they're going to have their hands full with Midland, though.
I think that's probably the big difference in Coppell this year, what Joe McBride, who is a defensive coach by nature, what he's done with that Cowboy defense.
It is. It's interesting to see them. They're running a 3-4. They really have been really good at making adjustments as they did against Duncanville. After that one drive where Duncanville looked fantastic running the ball, Coppell shut them down. So we'll see what they can do with Midland.
And you get a one-school town like Coppell, and the whole community rallies around the high school team.
That's right. It's one of the neat things about high school football, especially the one-school towns where the whole town follows the team, not just if you have a kid there. And you still see that even at the big 5A level like Coppell.
Speaking of that, at the big 5A level, you got Southlake Carroll playing at Cowboys Stadium. A huge crowd will be on hand, not only from Southlake, but also from Abilene, because the Abilene Eagles, of course, travel very well, especially on the heels of a state championship season last year. 9-3 record this year for both these teams.
That's right. Southlake Carroll's really been on a roll of late. They've been playing better almost every week after a rough start. Kenny Hill's playing well at quarterback.
That was a huge play on a 4th down play to hit Sean Hoagland last week against Colleyville Heritage.
That's
to
right.
Break open that game.
That's the kind of team, the kind of play that can really get you going for the next round, too. And obviously they kind of have a score to settle with Abilene.
Yep, and that stems from a couple of years ago in the playoffs. Now, what's also neat about this is a pretty good Texas high school football playoff rivalry through the last decade, going back to the Chase Daniel and Greg McElroy quarterbacking days of Southlake Carroll against Taylor Potts and Abilene. And Abilene the last time got the better of Southlake Carroll, probably mainly because of Chris Williams, the linebacker for Abilene at the time, who knocked Riley Dodge out of that game a couple of years ago.
That's right, and that kind of spelled the end to really a Carroll, just a golden few years for Carroll, where it was just amazing. The dynasty, just win after win after win in championship, and they're kind of getting close to climbing back up there.
Well, one of the other matchups we preview this morning, DeSoto goes on the road and plays against Austin Bowie, 6 o'clock tonight in Round Rock. And of all the games that were played last week, perhaps DeSoto's 38-0 win over Dallas Skyline was the most impressive.
That was. I was shocked. I had to look to make sure that score was right. You know, Bowie is obviously DeSoto is known for really running up the score with Ryan Polite and all his really talented core of receivers, but for DeSoto to throw a shutout was just really surprising. Bowie, they're looking at a team that I kind of was similar to Arlington Martin last year, where they started out slow but have really come on strong. So they got a tough match ahead of them.
The final game of the day at Cowboys Stadium tonight, a Class 4A battle between unbeaten Highland Park and 10-2 Mesquite Poteet, and this ought to be a good matchup too.
It is. It's a Mesquite Poteet's kind of the Cinderella team of these playoffs. They were 1-19 the previous two seasons, and this year they really had a breakthrough year. Obviously, they're going up against another dynasty in Highland Park, who is undefeated and this reloads every year with Coach Randy Allen. So it'll be a big test for Poteet. And
some good quarterbacks in that matchup, as Poteet has Bo now, and for Highland Park, you got two quarterbacks. With Brady Bergen, of course, as well as Jake Howitt. Yeah, you know, and like David McNabb said last week, Jake Howitt is basically a defensive back who has really stepped in and has been a dual threat for them. I believe he still leads the team in rushing. He and Bergen steps in and is more of a traditional drop-back passer. So between the two of them, it doesn't always work when you switch quarterbacks, but Highland Park is making it work. And how about the Trojans of Newman Smith High School in Carrollton? Not a rich football tradition at Newman Smith, but they beat Dallas Carter last week after beating Rockwall in the first week of the playoffs, and the Trojans have moved on to take on storied Tyler John Tyler at 2 o'clock in Waco today. Right, Smith coach Paul Ress and his staff have done a really great job this year. They lost some really key offensive starters last year, the guys that were really putting up the numbers for them. And they started slow again this year, but have really rallied. Got a lot of momentum going in here, and could see an upset this week. All right, and some of the other games being played today, they include in Class 3A, unbeaten Argyle taking on those powerful Buckeyes of Gilmer. They always have good teams in Gilmer, as they do in Argyle these days. Also, Wichita Falls Rider in Class 4A will play Birdville. That's a noon kickoff in Bedford at Pennington Field. And finally, you got Mesquite Horn, one of the surprise teams in the playoffs down at Floyd Casey Stadium in Waco, taking on the Leander Lions. And Tim Polzer will rejoin us later, as we will talk Landry Award later on here on VYPE TV. And coming up next on VYPE TV, we'll introduce you to a well-known sports figure in Plano and learn what drives him to inspire so many. And later, we'll tell you about the 5 finalists for the Landry Award and how you can help determine the winner. In 1957, John Clark began his legendary coaching career in Plano. 11 years later, he had a record of 107-17, had won 2 state titles and 9 district championships. But it was a phone call that changed his life. We tell you his story in this week's FCA Spotlight.
Well, my high school coaches were a big influence on me. They were all World War II veterans and came to our school to coach, and so they had a big influence on me. I wanted to try to help some other people the way they helped me, and hopefully I could pass those lessons along to them. Well, I first heard about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes from Bobby Richardson, the old New York Yankee. He came to Dallas and told about FCA. He said it was beginning, and at the end of the program, he passed out papers and said, if you'd like to start an FCA huddle at your school, fill this out. So I filled it out. In a few days I got a call from a lady, and she asked me if I was still interested in starting the FCA huddle in Plano. I told her I was, and he said, well, Coach Landry would like to talk to you. And so I talked to Coach Landry, and he came out and helped us get started. He was just really encouraging about it, because it was sort of new to this area, and schools were getting started. And so I think we were one of the few schools that got started at that time. So he was always encouraging to everyone, and to us certainly.
I'd like to present you with the first Neil Jeffrey Leadership Award.
I don't think there is a better way to contribute to and influence the future of our country than being on that team. So I thank you for your commitment to it. Thank you, and God bless.
It's very humbling recognition, I'll say for sure. Neil is such a faithful Christian example and witness, and so that part of it is certainly an honor. And besides that, I often think of the many coaches that we have in Plano that have sponsored our FCA huddles, and they're really the heart of the FCA program in Plano. So just the opportunity to kind of represent them is, as I said, a very humbling experience.
What a great honor for a great man, John Clark in Plano. Coming up next on VYPE TV, why do great athletes agree to play in colleges so far from home? David McNabb will tell us. And later, we'll tell you about the 5 finalists to the first ever Landry Award and give you a closer look at the trophy itself.
The November issue of VYPE High School Sports Magazine breaks down our list of the area's top 20 running backs, as well as which area football teams may make a run to a state title. You'll also find an inside look at prolotherapy, a high school athlete's alternative to surgery, and a look back at Highland Park's state team tennis title. Get your free copy of the November VYPE High School Sports Magazine on racks today.